So I've come down into the Nethan Gorge near Crossford. I've been following a little badger track which you can see up there. It's very steep down here, so I'm having to be a bit careful. But there are some large sandstone crags down here with some very interesting features in. Here where I've put my hammer. So this bed within the sandstone contains these rather strange circular features with this dark rim infilled with something that looks pretty similar to the sandstone around it. And I was a bit confused as to what they were. You can see a bigger one there, and then you find this one here. See this one, you can see where a piece of it has fallen away from the sandstone around it, and you can see that pattern on the underside of the sandstone. That pattern is part of a bark pattern, probably associated with some branches of a plant that was like a tree, a lycopod, which is a carboniferous forest, part of a carboniferous forest. So you can actually see the imprint of the bark there preserved in the sandstone. And you can see more of these branches. Probably would have been washed down in a river, in a flood, and carried with a lot of sand in the river and then deposited within the sand. And as they were buried, they've become preserved and lithified. So the wood inside has become replaced by material that's very similar to the sand around it, and the rim, the bark, has actually formed this kind of dark, well, it's weathering dark, this rim around the edge. So I've come a little bit further down the badger track from where we saw the imprints of the wood fragments, and we still have this sandstone forming a big crag feature along the gorge. But here we can see what's underneath it. We've got a really shaly, soft mudstone, which is eroding out, preferentially forming a slight undercut under the sandstone crag. So what have we got? Some very thin, shaly fragments of greyish mudstone. And these would have formed in a more kind of quiet water setting, possibly some kind of overbank flood, and then formed in a floodplain, and then been covered by an erosive channel body. Along a bit further in this sandstone, and we can see more of these lycopod branches sticking out. You can see a piece there with the bark imprint in the sandstone behind it. If we just pan down, we've got this amazing piece squashed slightly, so it's slightly kind of elongate, but you can see the bark patterning and see how it kind of goes in to the rock face and out again. So we've kind of got slightly bent branch, but so this is a branch of a lycopod, so almost a little bit like some kind of conifer tree, and so you're looking at a bit of a tree branch that's maybe 350 million years old. More nice sandstone features. This one might be a bit difficult to get on camera because we have a high exposure of some massive sandstones all the way up there. It's got the sun on it nicely, which is picking out some of the internal bedding. So you see all those little laminations in there, which are structures formed by waves, sediment waves and ripples within deposits in a riverbed. And you can see in places they cross-cut each other, so it's another example of some cross-bedding. And you can see that there's slightly different textures to the surface, so some of it's finer grained, and that section in the middle there is a bit coarser, a bit rougher in texture, and that's cutting off some of the structures below it. So we've got these laminations being truncated by the base of that slightly coarser material. So what we've got coming through there is a thin, small channel unit, which is carrying some coarser grained sand. It's a very fine gravel in a channel line, and so this is part of a braided stream system. So where you had a wide area of stream, you've got sandy bars, and you've got slightly gravelly channels being deposited in between these sandier bars. And as we go upwards, you can see another unit of some slightly coarser sand with these really strong bedding structures in it. So the migrating gravel and sand bar within the channel system. And all just stacking on top of each other, eventually becoming buried and lithified to form this hard, massive sandstone. I've just come up the bank a little way to the top of this sandstone, and up here you can see this really kind of rubbly looking horizon at the top of it, which is overlain by another sandstone unit. It's a bit difficult to see in the light, but you can see all these knobbly bits and some little vertical lines coming down through some parts. This is likely to be a rooty horizon, and this white colouring it has reflects that it was probably some kind of soil layer. So we're getting minerals being deposited, weathering of the rocks at the surface or the sediments at the surface, and we're getting some growth of plants, possibly some burrowing. You can see a little bit, if I can zoom in, it's not going to focus. On this basal bit here you can see all those nodular bits and holes, which are indicative of some of these roots where the material's weathered out of them that was formerly in there. So we've got a big deposit of sandstone, and then we've had the development of a soil layer, a surface layer with some vegetation. Another great exposure of this massive sandstone unit. As we pan down to the bottom here, we get back into this kind of flood deposit with these circular forms, which are kind of fragments of branches and wood that have been fossilized within this flood flow. And if we pan along, it's a bit difficult with the changing light, but we can see some kind of almost slabs of coaly material. These might have been bigger trunks, bigger sections of wood that were being carried along in the flow. Really dark, of fragmented organic material. Well, this outcrop just gets better and better. Following the sandstone along, we now start coming into what's below, where we have this mudstone, shaly dark grey mudstone forming this sharp break at the base of the sandstone. We can focus in on this sandstone a little bit and we can see some really nice cross bedding on that face. It's a little bit discoloured by some fluid flow along the joint there, but we've got some lovely cross bedding. But we can have a closer look at some of this mudstone underneath. It's just very fine grained sediment, thinly bedded, thinly laminated. But as you get down into it, there's something interesting further down. So we have this dark, very black looking layer, and if we break a piece of it off, you can see that shiny black surface of a coal layer. So we have a sandstone with mudstone below it, and the mudstone contains some layers of coal. And I think I can carefully scramble down. What we might find, I do it carefully because some of this is collapsed, is look at this cavern, which looks like an old working. I'm definitely not going in there. It looks like someone's worked into the back face and possibly looking for the coal that's below this sandstone. But we can carry on round gingerly. And see this mudstone carries on below the sandstone. Can't quite see the coaly layer. The coaly layer's down here. So this layer contains some stringers of coal. And then if we pan back down, we can see that there's this layer of mudstone with the coals in it, and then we actually get into another bluff of sandstone below. I can just about see that below that sandstone below us there's another mudstone horizon. So we have a sequence of these interbedded thick channel sandstones underlain by mudstones. And so we had a sequence where we had these channels coming through, and then in between the channel sandstones being deposited we've got more slack water environments where we're getting finer grained sediments, we're getting plant growth, vegetation growth, and then we're getting these big floods that come through, carving channels, carrying lots of sediment and vegetation and depositing that within the channels, and then continued deposition of lots of sandstone above, so huge, to form these big channel sandstone deposits that are currently over the top. In fact, if we look a little bit more closely up here, see at the top of this sandstone bed we've got some kind of whitish marley looking sediment. Possible we've got some soil layers in there and another slightly shaly band underneath this other massive sandstone that's forming the overhang. So just come down a bit further, pretty carefully because it's a bit steep down here, but come down through this mudstone. There's another important horizon which is we can see in the mudstones here. It might not look like much, got these kind of nodules, nodular, these are ironstone nodules, which are formed within the mudstones. Let's see, there's one a little bit closer just here. So these ironstone nodules are also an important resource in the history of the area, as there was also, not only was there coal mining, there was also in some places mining for ironstone. You can see how it has that kind of red colour, which is the oxidation of some of the deposits, possibly hematite. And we can see that red colour in this fragment which is broken off. Also some stringers of coal in there too. It's iron staining. So I have to be a little bit careful here. I'm standing a bit close to the edge. But this is that second sandstone unit that's below. And now we can start to see that even below that there's more mudstone, that dark stuff that's down through the trees. So perhaps I can get down there and have a look. But really. So we've come down below the sandstone outcrop that we could see below us from above. And so here we are at the level of this slightly thinner sandstone unit. And you can see in this one, whereas the top one was very massive, this one's got some joints in it. You can see all these surfaces coming towards us and away from us. So this surface and this surface are two what we call conduit joints, joints that are at some consistent angle. And these are characteristic of fairly resistant rocks like sandstones, which these are. And you can see that they've got a moderately regular spacing. You see the breaks in the rock. And we can see that below this sandstone we've also got a very muddy horizon. So we've got another channel sandstone coming through our river environment. If we carry on a bit further along, see, we can still see the material below. See how knobbly all of this is. Pretty rooty horizon, possibly some kind of soil layer in the mud, forming these very gnarled looking root systems. Can you see that? In there.